So let's go ahead and jump to St. Bart's. So St. Bart's is actually the oldest hospital in Europe. It was built in 1123. Yeah, 1123. Now, if you don't know how far back 1123 is, let me just refresh your memory. This is a time when there are still feudal lords.
One day, lad, all this will be yours.
What, the curtains?
No, not the curtains, lad.
Kings.
But I order you to be quiet.
Oh, who does he think he is?
I'm your king.
Well, I didn't vote for you.
And peasants.
Hey, shut up! Will you shut up? Ah, now we see the violence inherent in the system. Shut up! Oh, come and see the violence inherent in the system. Help, help! I'm being repressed, bloody peasant! Oh, what a giveaway. Did you hear that? Did you hear that, eh? That's what I'm on about. Did you see him repressing me?
In 1567, St. Bart's first physician was Dr. Rodrigo Lopez, who was actually accused of plotting to poison Queen Elizabeth I. Didn't meet a very great end. They actually hung him, drawn and quartered the good old man. Ouch, that's not a fun way to go. It's a really good piece of history to know, though. So, later in 1609, you have William Harvey, who was the appointed hospital physician. He discovered the circulation of blood, so good for him. The building actually escaped the Great London Fire of 1666. The only medieval building that remains is the tower of the Church of St. Bartholomew. The rest of them were demolished in the 18th century, and what remained are those designed by James Gibbs, who is a famous architect in British history. Now, his most known achievement was the St. Martin in the Fields located in the city of Westminster, London. His great church designs were very, very, very popular in America. Here is an example of a church in Carolina that looks almost like St. Martin in the Fields. So, Dr. Watson and Stanford make their way over to St. Bart's to meet Sherlock Holmes. Let's go ahead and do a book quote, because I love those, because this is a great way to get a feel for the setting. This was a lofty chamber, lined and littered with countless bottles. Broad low tables were scattered about, which bristled with retorts, test tubes, and little Bunsen lamps with their blue flickering flames. There was only one student in the room, who was bending over a distant table, absorbed in his work. At the sound of her steps, he glanced around and sprang to his feet with a cry of pleasure. "I found it! I found it!" he shouted to my companion, running towards us with a test tube in his hand. "I have found a reagent which is precipitated by hemoglobin-4 and by nothing else." He had discovered a gold mine. Great delight could not have shown upon his features. So they are then introduced, and Sherlock quickly lets Dr. Watson know all his quirks and vices, and if that be okay and the flat be agreeable, then Dr. Watson and Sherlock have a deal. They're going to be flatmates. Of course, this kind of introduction plays out a little differently in BBC Modern Series.
I don't know where we're meeting. I don't even know your name. I know you're an army doctor and you've been invalided home from Afghanistan. I know you've got a brother who's worried about you, but you won't go to him for help because you don't approve of him, possibly because he's an alcoholic, more likely because he recently walked out on his wife, and I know that your therapist thinks you're limp psychosomatic quite correctly, I'm afraid. It's enough to be going on with, don't you think? The name's Sherlock Holmes and the address is 221B Baker Street. Afternoon.
So the excited Dr. Watson heads over to 221B Baker Street the next day. And here we are, Baker Street, the iconic street where the home of Dr. Watson and Sherlock for the rest of the series is played out in. So, if you didn't know, Baker Street was actually laid out in the 18th century by none other than William Baker. This was originally a high-fashion residential district, but over time it became a commercial and business area, and also known for having lots of offices. Notable residence was the first Madame Tussauds last works of 1835 to 1884. And you also have Marks and Spencer's, which is the largest retailer in the UK. They actually held their offices there. And of course, Dr. Watson and Sherlock Holmes. However, during the writing of the books, it's interesting that Baker Street only went up to number 85 and not 221. It was later in 1920 when York Place was incorporated with Baker Street, and then in 1930, Upper Baker Street was merged with Baker Street, and then number 221, ta-da, finally appeared. Ha, didn't know that. So by 1922, it was actually the Abbey National Building that occupied the addresses 219 to 229 for many years. So they were receivers of all the fan mail from the Sherlock Holmes fans. And by the 1990s, you have the Sherlock Holmes museums that appeared on that same block of strip. And they were not too happy about Abbey National Building getting all their fan mail, and they wanted it all for themselves. So I think a battle ensued for a certain amount of years, and it kind of played out like this in my head.
I don't want to hear this. Then let go of the ring and walk away. Never.
So after many years of fighting for the rights to receive the fan mail, the city of Westminster granted them the rights to receive the fan mail and gave them the address 221B Baker Street.
I've done it. I've won. The ring is mine. It's mine! We're going to clean it up and make it pretty. My own, my love, my precious.
The Georgetown house in which the museum resides, it says most likely resemble or would have been the place of what Sir Arthur Conan Doyle pictured for his characters. However, if we go back to Dr. Watson, as he makes his way to Baker Street to meet Sherlock and the proposed residence, the only description we have of this place in the book is that it consisted of a couple of comfortable bedrooms and a single large airy sitting room, and cheerfully furnished and illuminated by two broad windows. That's it. So before we continue our tour, well, actually, let's go ahead and end our tour. The best way to end it is jump to the BBC Modern series, just to put a little bit in there, because, like I said, I love Sherlock, and I thought it'd be fun. So they couldn't film it on Baker Street because it's a high traffic area, and you can't go anywhere without some kind of memorabilia commemorating good old Sherlock Holmes, like the museum found. So they went ahead and went to Gower Street. Now, Gower Street is taken from the name Lady Gertrude Leveson Gower, who was husband of the 4th Duke of Bedford. Remember, the 5th Duke is the one who did Russell Square. The street was paved in 1790. Gower Street was actually home to some really important people, like Charles Darwin, which you should know, or you've been living under a rock. He was a father of the idea of evolution. We all descended from apes. And you also have Dance the Younger, City of London surveyor and architect. One of his major public buildings was a Newgate prison built in 1782. The London gallows were actually moved here, and public hangings were quite a spectator sport then. I mean, grab your popcorn, grab your soda, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And bring with you a strong stomach.
Any last requests, pig?
Yeah, loosen the knot and let me go.
Yeah, man. Of course we don't let him go.
And so, this kind of fell out of style. Actually, by 1868, executions were discontinued. And in the early 20th century, the prison was wiped clean slate off the whole existence of London. So back to Gower Street in the modern BBC series, the outside scenes are shot at 187 North Gower Street. It was actually the former residence of Giuseppe Mazzini from the 19th century. He was the so-called apostle and father of Italian freedom. The insides of the shooting are actually taking place on a stage set. Interesting to know. Well, I don't want to ruin it. The rest of the kind of locations are fictional. There's not much to tie them into London, and the half of the book, if you don't know, studying Scarlet, takes place in America and then jumps back for the finale in London. And I don't want to do any spoilers for you. If you haven't read it, you need to. It's a great read, and it sets the tone for the rest of the good old Sherlock stories. That has been all for Turning On to Preservation. Thank you for checking me out, liking my page, like my video, follow me, subscribe, whatever you gotta do, spread the word about this Sherlock Tour series, because it's gonna be fun and it's gonna be, educational too. Who would have thought it? Don't forget, check me out, turningontopreservation.com. Follow me on Twitter at turningu, as in the letter, on to, as in the number, Prez. That's Turning On to Prez. And also check me out on Facebook at Turning On to Preservation, where I'll have extra stuff that's not featured there. Featured there. So please do so. Thank you all. And once again, have a great day. And see you later.
Doctor. In fact, you're an army doctor.
Yes.
Any good?
Very good.
Seen a lot of injuries then. Violent deaths.
Yes.
Bit of trouble too, I bet.
Of course, yes. Enough for a lifetime, far too much.
Want to see some more?
Oh, God, yes.